topic is going to be on common diseases and problems of the landscape, and we're going to be going through this fairly rapidly in somewhat alphabetical order, mostly on trees, but we will have some shrubs that we're going to also highlight on as we're going through. One of the main reasons why trees are a priority in our topic is that the trees are bigger, whereas shrubs are generally smaller, and a lot of times people are busy pruning on them more so that they prune off a lot of the problems. And then we're also going to discuss some flower issues and lawn issues. So with that being said, we can start off, and we'll go to the ash as our first tree. And with the ash, a couple of things can go on. One is that you'll usually find that the leaves can be curled into a tight cluster, almost looks like a claw or a hand. And if you peel that open, you will then find that inside you'll have aphids. Now, aphids are very common. Most all plants get aphids, but on ash they cause tremendous leaf distortion, and so it's one of the things that more people look at and have relevance with. Now, generally for that, there's a number of different products out there that you can go and control aphids with. One is just straight water. If you can wash the plant with a hard stream of water, you can usually knock those little guys off. Second one is that you can end up using a number of different products, and there's a new organic out this year. This is Lawn and Garden Spray with Spinosad. Spinosad is a recently found in the last 10 years. It causes insects to stop eating, and so they die from dehydration. It kind of is like giving them the flu. And so you kill bugs that way, and as you know, the flu does not kill you overnight, but it takes a number of days to happen. And so with Spinosad here, it follows the same course, and so you'll see the bugs still wandering around for several days, and then all of a sudden they die off. Other items that you can look at would be neem oil or pyrethrins, and so those are a couple of different products. Now, also in the organic line, we've got ladybugs, and there's praying mantis. Now, ladybugs are one of the chief insectivores that eat other soft-bodied insects like aphids, so it's something that we find often around here, and they do quite well. So in case you're wondering, you can come and watch these programs on ACCTV.org, and any of the classes, such as the great class that you missed last week, they have on the web, and so you can go back through ACCTV.org, AccessCarsonCityTelevision.org. Alright. And so you can end up using ladybugs. Now, ladybugs are a natural predator that eat aphids, and so you can turn these loose. Following directions on the use of ladybugs is very important. If you don't, and the day is hot, they'll just get up and fly away. But you turn them loose at night, you water them down when you get them loose after they're cold, and then they slowly crawl up the plant, and then they'll eat the aphids and not fly away. So it's a fun thing to buy for the kids, but they shouldn't be around when you turn them loose, because usually kids are asleep at 10 o'clock at night when you're supposed to let them go. Another organic control is praying mantis, and in here you get 2 sets of mantis eggs, sacks like this, and you set these out in the areas of your garden where you normally have an insect problem, such as the garden, the flowers around the trees. And within 2 weeks of putting these out, they usually hatch. They all hatch within about an hour, and then they crawl away, and so you never see anything. So oftentimes when you buy these, you never know if anything's happened until later on in the season, and you find them, because when they hatch, they're, you know, about that big there and size of a hair, and off they go. There's, you know, 500 to 1,000 of them in a egg sac there, or egg nest. So, okay, after ash, well, no, still on ash, we end up, you can end up finding that you get browning around the edges of the leaves, and this is common with a lot of plants here. Ash, maples, sycamores, oaks, poplars, aspen, and this browning around the edge is oftentimes due to lack of deep moisture. People often come in and they say, well, I'm watering my plants, and you say, how long? And they say, oh, I've got them on a drip, and it goes for 20 minutes and a day, and they do it 2 or 3 times a week or every day. And you have to figure out that when you have a dripper and it only puts out a gallon an hour and it's on for 20 minutes, that's 1/3 of a gallon, or, you know, a quart plus. Okay? Well, if you're expecting a tree to do well on a quart of water every day, you're mistaken, because most trees will end up using anywhere between 50 gallons and 400 gallons of water a day. So, you know, you're looking at a lot of water being given off and very little water being applied. Now, the other item that I just briefly mentioned was some people water every day. Nowhere in the world does it rain every day. Okay, the soil is not kept wet every day. And in those places of the country where you get a lot of mist, or it's moist or high humidity, and the soil stays moist for long periods of time, they have a lot of soil issues as far as fungus in the ground. And they also have a lot of leaf issues, such as mildew. And so normally here I would want you to go and try and water less often and longer to avoid getting these root rot issues. And unfortunately they are fairly common here, because a lot of times we have a soil type in the area which is a heavy soil, clay soil, soil that doesn't drain well, or doesn't take water very quickly. The other soil type that we have is sandy soil, and then the third type is rocky. And you know, rocky is a lot of rock, and it can be in both sand or clay or loamy soils, but it's just hard to dig in. Plant roots actually do well in clay soils, sandy soils, and rocky soils that we have here. It's just how the water moves through it means how well that the plant ends up doing. Now, with the root rot, it is called Phytophthora, and there is a product out that's fairly inexpensive that you can use to treat Phytophthora, and it's Aliette here. You will apply this to the ground and help kill the disease in the soil. Now, there's another product out called Subdue. Subdue, I think, runs about $150 a bottle, but Phytophthora is very common here. Most often people get it on pansies, and you'll see the pansy doing fine, it does fine, it does fine, then one day it turns yellow, and then the next day it's all wilted, and the following day you go out and you can pull it right up and there's no roots on it. And you know, it happens in 4 days that the disease will attack the plant and the plant is dead. And so it's very uncomforting to people to realize that something can happen so quickly to their plants. Now, Phytophthora also attacks a number of other plants. We'll get to Scotch broom, but also arborvitae and junipers, and these are three of the main shrubs or trees that we will be dealing with that get the root rot. All right. Next plant that we're going to come to is going to be the aspen. Aspen have a myriad of symptoms, and in aspen we'll also talk about poplar, willow, and cottonwood. So because they're all of the same relation or have the same problems, with aspen, first we can talk about curled leaves, and curled leaves can also be caused by frost, it can be caused by aphids, but normally curled leaves are caused by somebody spraying a 2,4-D or weed killer product on the lawn or around the shrub bed, because aspen will send up suckers, and by spraying this weed killer, it is translocated, or it's pulled in through the leaf that's been sprayed, and then it is moved from that place through the root and up into the main parent tree. Now, one root oftentimes in trees will work one set of branches, so people will come in and they'll tell me, well, you know, this branch or this side of the tree looks great and this side looks terrible. Well, in a lot of deciduous plants, the stem flow from the root up through the branches is on the same side of the tree, and we will discuss pines and spruce a little later, and I'll tell you the difference there. But so the root that's coming in on the bad side often affects those branches, and so we'll look and see, because if the tree is looking poorly in one area, then we want to find out, was there a weed killer put down, was there gasoline put down, or, you know, accidentally spilled while filling a lawnmower, or a weed blower, or even a snow blower can cause these. Now, other things will cause curled or cupped leaves on aspen, and this will be paints, engine cleaners, window cleaners, stains. So any of those things that may be going on, if somebody's doing that on a hot day, a lot of these products that I just made mention will volatilize or turn from a liquid to a gas and float off through an area, and this gas cloud will then affect the plants that it comes in contact with. Now, aspen are, and the rest of the family that I made mention, are very sensitive to volatilization of these products, and so you'll find that there's a number of times you'll see it occurring in these plants, and you don't see it happening in other plants nearby. Alright, next on aspen, you're going to see black spots on the leaves. Now, I will make mention that on roses we also find the same thing, and this is normally a fungus, and you can end up spraying with a fungicide. And while there are a lot of different fungicides, we now have some organic ones. Serenade here is one that you can end up using. Another one that is in bulk here is Rhapsody. Oftentimes we have this for people with diseases on their lawns, because you usually have a lot that you have to control there. You may also have, well, this is for lawn control again. Here's Halts. This is a systemic. So instead of being just a contact like what the Serenade was, and contact means that when it comes in contact with the surface of the disease, it kills it. Halts is a systemic, so it's absorbed in through the plant, and then it kills from the inside out, or kills what's living on the interior of the plant. Another product that I recommend a lot here is this Phyton 27. This is a translocatable copper, and copper is great for killing a lot of diseases, and it's a bactericide and a fungicide, so it is good for a lot of things. Now, with any of your sprays, a product like Spray Grip here, this helps hold the product to the plant, and so it or to the bug, or whatever else you may be putting down. So adding a little bit of Spray Grip, and this usually is minimal, it's a half a tablespoon per gallon of water, ends up being a really great additive that you can put into your collection, and will usually double or triple the effectiveness of your spray. A lot of times, if you read the label thoroughly on your sprays, it will tell you to add a non-ionic surfactant, and that's what Spray Grip is. Alright, so that'll take care of the leaf spots on the aspen and on the roses there, and that would be one of the better ways to go about it. Now, also black and brown edges on aspen, again, is generally lack of water. So you want to watch that aspen grow wild up in the Sierras, where there's a stream of water that flows by 24 hours a day. People bring it down here into the valley, and they put it out, by their lawn or out in the hot, dry desert areas, and low humidity down here, and aspen just do really poor. Stress to us brings on disease, brings on other symptoms, physical symptoms. It can bring on mental problems, and so the same holds true for plants. I can't speak on mental symptoms for plants, but definitely physical attributes can be seen there. All right. Now, black and brown rings on aspen leaves, oftentimes the soil has got a high pH or is alkali, so we normally recommend the use of sulfur to drive that down. And sulfur comes in a lot of different products. You can find it in just straight sulfur. You can also find it in products like Dr. Iron or FST. It also comes as a blended item in what we call Hydra Blue, which is aluminum, not ammonium, but aluminum sulfate. And this is one of the fastest acting sulfurs to help change the pH quickly. And by changing the pH, thus the plant isn't pulling this up so much. The alkali and these rings will stay there. Once the portion of the leaf has been killed, or the portion of the tree has been killed, it's killed. Okay? There's no bringing it back. Okay? You can't have a dead something and bring it back. There's only one person that I've ever heard of that can do that, and he's not around here to help us with our plants these days. So that's the first thing. The second thing is oftentimes lack of water. And again, this is deep water. People often will water shallow, and aspen just use a lot of water. And so this dieback will happen on a hot day with wind blowing, and boom, you get a big concentric ring around the edge of the leaf. And then it'll happen again and happen again. And so you'll see this going on. Okay. Another thing that can happen on aspen is the leaves will just basically turn black overnight. And it can be a mold or a fungus there. And again, oftentimes we have you spray. When plants are stressed, okay, or it's called under pressure, there's far more chances of you getting this fungus, these diseases, these insects, than if the plants are happy and healthy. How do you keep plants happy and healthy? Water properly, fertilize occasionally here, watch the pH of the soils, don't overcrowd, don't over with the same type of plant. Don't plant the same plant that your neighbor may have if the neighbor is not a good gardener. And so, you know, watch a number of these things, and you'll have a yard that has less problems. All right. Next we go to oozing from the trunk, limbs or trunk. And oftentimes we will see this, and the ooze can come out as a clear ooze, as a black ooze, or even as a frothy ooze. And these oozings will be seen on a lot of different plants. You can see it on cherries, you can see it on willows, elms, aspen, and these are all interior actions being caused that are killing the cells, turning it into a bubbling mass like what we end up making beer out of. You know, fermentation is going on, or champagne, so that when you see this stuff oozing out, it's being forced out from a fermentation process. Now, if the plant is young, I'll tell you, this Phyton will go and help control it. Okay, may not necessarily kill it, but definitely help control it. And if you can control it long enough, the plant will encapsulate it and kill it off. If the plant is in the mid-age of its life, oftentimes using a product like this, there's no way you can put it down often enough or with enough diligence that you'll get the problem under control. And if the tree is old, oftentimes we don't even bother doing anything except telling you to wait until the tree dies or to cut it down, because it's an infection spot to reinfect other plants further down in the yard. And oftentimes these diseases are spread by wind or rain, and you know, the wind often blows from the Sierras towards Salt Lake City. So, you know, if you're in that path and you know that there's an infection upwind, you're far more likely to get this and spread it to other plants in your yard or your neighbor's yard. So this is where being a good citizen will come into play. You may want to save the tree for this year, but knowing so and doing so can end up causing other trees to become infected. All right. Bumps on the leaves on aspen. Oftentimes these are caused by leaf hoppers, and these are spreading a virus, and the leaf will be, you know, bumpy like acne. And with leaf hoppers, you can end up using a number of different insecticides. You know, I made mention of some others like neem or pyrethrins, but you can also look at like the multi-insect killer here, and with this one spray you kill them right away. And a lot of times people just want to be done with that. Now, leaf hoppers can come in from a number of other places. Oftentimes they come from pastures, alfalfa fields, areas like that. Very high with leafhopper populations, and so it's not a one spray and you're done type situation. You have to continue to spray time and time again. Alright, other things that can happen with a number of trees would be suckers. And again, with aspen, the sucker will come up off from a root, and so we can look at aspen, silver maples, sometimes black locust or purple robe locust, in which a tree comes up which may be the exact replicant of the parent as on aspen, but sometimes it's the rootstock off a tree. Like if you have a purple robe locust, that's grafted onto a black locust rootstock, so you'll have black locust coming up. And so with black locust you have big thorns and white flowers that are fragrant, and the tree that you had originally was the purple robe locust, which had very few thorns and those long purpley grape-looking chains of flowers that hung down. So you'll get these suckers, and once again, people often spray these with that weed killer that I made mention of at the very beginning, and so this will affect the parent tree. All right.
I have
Yes.
a question. My locust, my pink flowery one,
Uh-huh.
it totally broke off in the wind, and the hole inside was like a bamboo pole. It's totally hollow.
Okay.
Is that disease or bugs or?
Okay, with your locust where it snapped off and it was hollow in the center, on roses and catalpas and sometimes on locust, and it's rare, we have a small wasp that will go around and lay an egg at the end of a cut branch, and the egg will hatch, and then it turns into a small borer, and these are called cane borers, and they work their way down through the tree and will kill the center of the tree off. Now this is not the same as what kills the center of the trees on apples and cottonwoods and things like that. That's more age related. But these cane borers are very prominent with people that have roses that never seal the ends of their roses or don't put down some long-lasting systemic insecticide such as merit or imidacloprid. And so that's what happened with your locust, why it had the center, but also the locust, the purple robe locusts are very brittle trees, and where they have a narrow, this is a wide angle right here, this is a narrow angle, okay, and oftentimes purple robe locusts have a lot of these narrow crotch angles which are very susceptible to wind damage. You hold your arm up like this, you put some weight on, and you can see that it pulls down at a sharp angle, thus breaking here or here. Whereas if your branches go out this way, it can bend a lot before it ever breaks. And so, you know, that's one of the things to look at, is doing a good pruning practice on your purple robe locust. If you get the branches to go more lateral than upright, your tree will last much, much longer. So, all right. Lastly, we'll go over small leaves on the plants. And small leaves are often attributed to lack of water, lack of fertilizer, or overwatering. And people say, well, how do you tell? Well, one of the easiest ways to tell is to dig a small hole. And you do that somewhere by the plant. If the hole is dry, then you know you're out of water. If the hole is wet, then you know you have too much water. And if the hole looks not too wet and not too dry, oftentimes it's a fertilizer issue. Now, most Nevada soils are very lacking in any nitrogen, and so nitrogen is the one fertilizer component that makes the leaves grow fast and large. And so you'll want to go and try and add more nitrogen, and also generally help acidify the soil. Now, other things that you can end up doing is that there's products like drought defense here, which you can end up putting on, and this will help hold water in to the plant and into the soil. So you can look at that. The wilt stop here is one that you can spray on the leaf of the plant. This holds the water into the plant. One of the nice things about wilt stop also, or wilt proof or cloud cover or anti-stress, is that should you have a fungus issue, mildew or anything like that, you can spray this on the plant and it seals it in so it doesn't breathe and manage to propagate. So it's another way of controlling a disease by going out and using a fungicide or type of pesticide, is just encapsulating it. One other way to control diseases is by removing, and so you may not have to remove the entire limb, but just go out and removing the infected leaves can be a good way to help stop the disease from spreading. So we can look at that. Now the next tree that I'd like to talk about is the beech, and usually with beech there's not a whole lot of issues there, but they are prone for aphids, and as I made mention earlier, aphids are everywhere on almost everything, and so a quick spray with that will usually take care of it, so we can watch for that. Alright, next plant is going to be birch, and people often will come in and the top of their birch tree is dead, you know, hasn't leafed out, or is barely leafing out, or has leafed out and then died. A number of things can happen there. One is lack of watering normally in the winter, late fall and winter months. Most people turn their sprinkler systems off sometime in September or October, and if you think about it, we have almost no precipitation during the months of October, November, and December. Usually all our snow comes in late January, February, or March, and our rains will come in the spring, or sometimes the thunderclouds will come in the summer. So winter watering is very, very important for us to do when you want to keep your plants healthy. So oftentimes people will find a tree or a shrub dies halfway back. Often that's due to lack of watering. Alright, another issue that we have on birch is that limbs are just dying off, or the whole tree dies. The very common problem here now is bronze birch borer. This little insect showed up 20 years ago or so, and has been wreaking havoc on most white birch. Now, white birch are birch trees that have a very white trunk in general. Okay, so people realize what I'm talking about. There is the European white birch, the standard white birch, and then there's the cutleaf weeping birch, and lastly is the Himalayan or Jackmani birch. Those all four have exceedingly white barks on their trunks, and these borers attack those trees. Other birch that we have that the borers don't attack is going to be the well, they also will attack paper birch. But there's river birch that they don't attack, Japanese birch, and there's a Rocky Mountain birch that they won't attack also. So we've got a number of birch trees that you can put in that aren't prone to borers and work out well. Alright, yellowing of the leaf where the vein stays green. Okay, this is seen on a lot of birch in the area. Again, this has to do normally with an iron, zinc, or manganese chlorosis. And iron is one of the most common problems that we have, that the pH of the soil is so high that it binds the iron and the plant can't pull any of the iron away. And so the leaves will be green around the veins, and then in the exterior or between the main veins you'll find yellowing or around the edges. Changing the pH, as I made mention, with the sulfur type products will be good, and then you can end up spraying the plant with a iron supplement, and this will help change the leaves to a green right away. And Iron Plus is a very good product that you can go and apply as a foliar spray. Do this once or twice and you've managed to apply enough product that the leaves are green again. Now, why is it important for the leaves to be green? The leaves are what produces the food for the trees. Okay? The leaves make their own food for the plants. If the leaves are not of the proper color or health, the amount of food that it makes decreases. Now, fertilizer is like vitamins, okay? For all of us, we take vitamins so we feel better, we have more energy, but you have to realize we do not live on vitamins, okay? We live on food, okay? Plants do the same thing. They live on food and not on fertilizer. Fertilizer is more like vitamins for them. So it's important that they have these nutrients available to them. And, you know, this is one of the ways to help keep them healthy like that. Alright, next on plants here, we'll hit catalpas. And catalpas are generally those trees with the giant elephant ear looking leaf. There's a number of them planted all over town. Some of them have the white flowers with the purple center and then the long bean pods, and other of them makes just that little round ball. People often come in and they're worried because the leaves are all tattered and shredded. Often you'll see far more of that on the southwest side of the tree, and this is caused by wind and by dust. So there's not a whole lot of us that we can do about these problems. And you know, now as the tree matures, it will protect itself more and more so that the problem will become reduced. And hopefully other plants in the area also will mature to help cover the ground and reduce the amount of dust being blown. So one item to look at that. Another one here is sudden wilt of some or all of the branching. Now that happened here at the nursery. We had a catalpa planted over here by our bedding plants area, and one year the top just wilted out and I wasn't sure what was going on, and after the bedding plants were gone, then the top grew back, and then the following year it did the same thing, and then more of it wilted down and died, and then part of the top wouldn't come back. And so what ended up happening is I realized that there was a root rot going on. Now the root rot, most people would think wouldn't affect a branch or a top of a tree, but in instances like this it does. And you know, there's a root rot, and then this turns into a wilt called verticillium. And while it won't kill the plant immediately, it can cause it over a long period of time. Alright, next we can look at cherry. And with cherry I made mention of leaf spots, which are common to aspen and roses. So you'll want to look at doing a fungicide treatment for that. But other items that will happen is oozing of the branches or out of the trunk, and this is caused by, again, it's a disease called gummosis, and the phyton here can help control that if it's a young tree. If it's a middle-aged or old tree, I usually tell you to tear it out quickly. Usually if you have cherries on it, I'll let you leave it in and harvest the cherries. If it's just a flowering cherry, I would like you to take it out soon. Gummosis is quite prevalent here, mostly on stone fruits. Cherries, peaches, plums, apricots, and prunes, and nectarines. And so it will spread to any of those trees, and this is usually an amber looking ooze that will come out of the tree and harden, and thus show you a symptom of the disease. Now if you use this phyton here on your tree, you are not able to eat any of the fruit. It's bad for us to ingest a lot of copper, so especially that copper. And so it would be something that you don't want to spray on the tree when there's fruit on it, because you won't be able to eat the fruit, and it's a good thing not to do so and just say, well, I won't eat it this year. You always get kids or birds or other creatures out there that will come in and snack on it, and you don't want them getting sick either. Alright, lastly here on cherries is that the bark may split and pop off or is missing on the southwest corner of the tree, and this is indicative of a problem a number of years prior in which the tree ran out of water during the winter usually, and it almost always occurs on that southwest side. And you know, the tree gets a lot of afternoon warmth. It's lacking in water, and then as soon as the sun falls behind the mountain, the tree turns cold because the outside temperature is below freezing. The sunlight is gone. The water in there is minimal, and so the cells rupture because of lack of water, not because of too much, and it kills off that portion of the tree. So that's another one to look at. All right, we'll go and now move on to crab apples. Often with crabs, you'll find that you can either get suckers, and we talked about treating that, or, well, no, we haven't. We've got a product out called Sucker Stopper, which you can spray on the suckers, which will not hurt the tree. It's a hormone that stops the growth from occurring. So you can spray this on the suckers. You can also spray it on aspens and other items that are in the yard that you don't want the suckers to continue growing on. Yes?
How about pears?
Yeah, you can spray Sucker Stopper on pears. So, alright. And so that would be one of the issues that we have, but one of the other ones is going to be mildew on the leaves. Now, oftentimes people don't realize that apples and crab apples have fine hairs, and usually these hairs are more prominent at the ends of the branches, right around the leaf or part of the leaf and on the bud. But if the majority of the end of the branch is covered in a white or gray mass, that is going to be mildew. And people are always questioning me. They say, well, I never water the tree, I never spray the foliage. Oftentimes mildew either occurs where it's in very dry conditions, or mildew occurs where it's very wet. And most of the mildew that we have on our plants is caused by just the weather being very dry, and we'll get mildew most often on roses and on crab apples. Those are the two that we usually will, shrubs and trees that we see it on. All right. We will also find another disease called fire blight. Now, fire blight will affect everything in the rose family. Now, you say, why is he talking about the rose family and apples and crab apples? Is because the apple and the crab apple are in the rose family. So are pyracantha, so are mountain ash, so are hawthorns, and cotoneaster. So all of these plants that I've made mention here are all in the rose family, and the disease fire blight will go and generally show itself most often when the tree is in flower or the shrub is in flower, and then the bee will become infected and move from one flower where it has picked up the infection, and then it carries it to another flower and redeposits it, and then the bacteria will spread and move to a new plant. Now, in the handout here, it may tell you that fire blight is not curable. Generally, it's not curable, but it's preventable a couple of ways. One is by pruning out any branch that you see that has got fire blight. And fire blight is indicative of a stem looking green one day, and then within 3 days, a whole big portion is entirely black. And the leaves are still hanging on there, the stem is black, everything is completely black. And the rest of the plant looks fine. And so this is fire blight. Removal of the disease, as I made mention earlier, is great in helping reducing the spread. You can also treat with streptomycin while the tree is in flower, or the plants are in flower. We do sell streptomycin here. So if you have fire blight in the neighborhood, spraying while the tree is in bloom is good. And as you know, streptomycin is something that we take for diseases here, or we used to take a lot more of it until they came out with different forms of penicillin. But you can also use this Phyton 27. This is another bactericide which will help control that. Alright, so after crab apples, we can move to elm trees. Normally around here, again, I mentioned that oozing out of the trunk of the tree, that's verticillium wilt. Once the tree has any size to it, it's impossible to control, but it can smell bad, it can draw bees. It used to be that they would have you cut out portions of the bark or hammer in tubes into the tree to help relieve the pressure from this fermentation so that it would drip out of the side of the tree and not run down. And that's not recommended any longer. They found that the more holes that you put in to anything, the greater chance you are of spreading the disease. And so that has been reneged. Now, on the elm, other items are going to be that the leaves are turning brown and becoming netted, or so you only see the veins of the leaf and it's kind of bare. This is caused by the Dutch elm beetle, and oftentimes you can control that by using an imidacloprid type product. That's available in a number of forms. Bayer, the aspirin people, came out with it originally, and they called it tree and shrub. So you can end up putting this down on the ground and placing this where it's going to get watered on a regular basis, and this will be sucked up through the plant and kills off most every insect that is feeding on the plant. So it'll do aphids, it'll do borers, it'll do elm leaf beetles, it'll do leaf miners, but you cannot use this on foodstuffs except for apples and pears, because apples and pears are special, and they won't let this chemical move into the fruit where it can move into the fruit on cherries and peaches and nectarines. So you can't be using that on those plants, but you can use it on birch trees to prevent bronze birch borers. You can use it on elm trees to stop elm leaf beetle. The list goes on and on. Alright, next plant we're going to get to then is going to be the juniper. And with junipers, a lot of times we'll see portions of the plant become gray or dusty looking, and usually we'll find this in the summertime, and most often this is caused by spider mites. Now, spider mites like hot, dry weather, or they like cold, wet weather, and they don't like anything in between. So one of the easiest things to do for controlling spider mites is to go out and once, twice a month with a strong stream of water, hook up something to your hose that gives you a jet stream, start at the top of the plant and work your way down, and you'll be surprised how brown the water is that eventually hits the ground. A lot of this brown that you see is caused by the spider mite falling off, or by the dust that has been collected in the spider mite web that is stuck to the plant. Now, spider mites are an ugly little creature. They have one long tooth on one side, or tusk, and short on the other side, and they go through and they rip open a channel of cell wall, and then they have a long tongue and they lap up the food, the moisture, food, plant sap, whatever you want to call it. And so they destroy huge portions of a tree where aphids just have a small nose, somewhat, if you can picture an elephant sticking its nose into a plant and sucking it out, where if we look at the other side, an elephant with a giant tusk ripping a huge gash open and then licking up the sap. I think you would agree that a small puncture wound caused by the trunk of the elephant rather than a rip by the tusk would be preferable. So spider mites are there. Now, other things that you can end up doing to stop spider mites is spraying with neem oil, or you can use another insecticide that will go and control spider mites, but you want to really watch when you're spraying so that you don't cause burning. Oftentimes people forget that most of these products have oil in them, and the oil in turn, if you spray during the middle of the day, will act as an oil like we would have put on our skin if we were sunbathing, and cause a greater chance of burning. So you always want to spray early in the morning or after the sun goes down. Yes?
I had a problem this spring with real little bitty red bugs coming in around all the windows, and I had junipers outside. I called an exterminator. He came over and he said they were clover mites.
Right.
And he sprayed and it seemed to take care of the problem. But my junipers are turning brown and looks like they're dying, so I'm wondering if he misdiagnosed it.
Well, those red insects inside the house, normally around the windowsills, are clover mites. Spider mites usually cause the plant to have a dusty, dirty hue to it, and if you stick it between your fingers and you hold it up to your ear, you can hear like dust grinding between your fingers. Or you can shake it on a white piece of paper and then you can watch these tiny little specks of dust. I need a magnifying glass now or a pair of cheaters to see them, but you can watch this dust kind of move across the paper, and these are mites moving away. And you know, it's all kind of ugly because you can end up getting these mites on you, and they live on you until, you know, you walk by another plant, and then they can fall off. And so humans and dogs and cats and birds are great carriers of insects, and you know, we like to think of ourselves as clean and neat and hygienic, and you know, we've got mites living on us. We've got certain mites that live in our eyelids there, and we don't know it. You know, it's just there. We've got mites that live in our house, in our bedding, that eat up the dust, our skin, you know, and it sounds gross, but they're beneficial to us. You know, they say most dust in a house, 80% of all dust in a house is caused by skin tissue that falls off. So, you know, think of that while you're dusting. Yeah, kind of scary.
Well, I had
But,
the arborist come out and said that there's some kind of spray, foliage spray that you spray on these junipers and eventually they'll green back up. Is that true?
That is true. And depending on what you have going on, you can spray these junipers that are not green with a couple of different products, and where it's always best to bring in a sample of the plant that is having an issue. Bring it in and have us look at it. You know, it's not to say that where we are here is a hospital and we're sterile. We are definitely not that. People bring in issues all the time. We have to look at it. We get shipments from, you know, different parts of the country, and they occasionally come in with problems. So bring your problem to us so we can see it and help diagnose, and then we can go and send you home with the proper product. And that's something that I can have you do. But oftentimes, you know, if you've got mites, we can sell you a different type of miticide. But if you've got another issue where you've pruned hard, we may have to sell you a fertilizer. So, you know, these are some things to look at. And it's not always, you know, what you think it is. It's like me in my car. The light comes on my car, and I have no idea what that little light means on the dashboard until you take it down to the mechanic and he hooks it up, and then it blinks 17 times, and then he tells you, oh, you know, your power steering fluid is low or something like that. But you know, it's not always what you perceive it being. All right. Another thing on junipers is that the branches are dying. Now, oftentimes we'll find that a branch dies, one here, one there, and if it's early spring or summer, oftentimes it's girdled down low next to the ground, and this is caused by voles. And voles are meadow mice. So you can use a product like Mackie here, which is a multi-feed anticoagulant, so it's very safe for the environment. You can put this down, and they will eat this, and it doesn't have anything in here which will attract the dogs, the cats, the birds to it. A good product. You have to remember that it's multi-feed, so if you put one down one day and they eat everything in there, you have to have another packet to put down the following day, and you have to keep putting it down until they stop eating. And once they stop eating, then you know that they've gone to become compost, and you know, that's the way that works. Now, another issue that we can find on junipers is that a branch may die halfway out of the branch, and then the bottom half of the branch is still green. This is often caused by a twig girdling borer, in which it eats around portions of the branch. It doesn't eat all the way down at the ground level like the vole will, and so again, the imidacloprid will go and help take care of that, but also pruning out where that borer has been and removing that will be beneficial. Lastly, with branches dying, and one branch will die, and then another branch will die, and then it seems like the whole branch, or I mean the whole plant dies overnight. That is caused by overwatering, and that's a root rot. And this is indicative often on junipers, arborvitae, Scotch broom, so be looking for that. So we just mentioned a problem with the dying off of the junipers and the arborvitae and the Scotch broom, and we'll go on to the broom. Broom can also have vole damage done, and the overwatering can cause root rot, and oftentimes people will come in and they say, you know, their Scotch broom just died all of a sudden. Well, again, if you live in a high clay soils, this is very indicative of root rot, in which the plant at times will just blow right off from the stem and act like a tumbleweed, and so you'll want to watch for that. Okay, we can also then go and look at well, we talked about fire blight. Fire blight can also get on hawthorns, and hawthorns are the tree that blooms all up and down King Street with the pink flowers there, so be on the lookout for that. Okay, next plant to come to mind here is going to be the honey locust, and again, with the honey locust, oftentimes you'll see these small dots on the trunk, and they're usually an orange color. Sometimes they're red, but this is indicative of a canker that the tree may have. Now, the weird thing is most times cankers are caused by damage further down on the trunk, and this damage is caused by most of the time humans, and you know, we call the symptoms weed eateritis, lawnmoweritis, tie the dog to the tree-itis, in which honey locusts have a thin bark here, and when the bark gets damaged, it will go and have portions die up and down or become stressed, and then it will get this cytospora canker in there, and you've got a nice big dead area. And you know, if you try and picture it, the bark of the tree is often like the skin of us, and the muscle that we have is often the place where the blood or the fluid flows inside the tree, and then our bones are the center of the plant. And so, you know, if you get diseases around the muscle or where the veins are flowing and kills off sections of that, the skin on the surface will die and the bone will stay in there, but the area around it is dead. And so, you know, when that happens, oftentimes the doctors have to go in and cut portions of the area out, and with trees they heal over. With humans, we don't do a very good job on that. And so with any of the cutting that may be done, you have to remember that you're always making a very weak spot there, and you'll want to watch that. So if the cut is deep and you're in a very windy area, oftentimes this will eventually lead to the trunk snapping or the branch breaking as the tree gets older. Alright, also on the honey locust, yes?
Well, I have a honey. I thought you were moving on. I just want to let you finish it.
Okay.
I've got a big mature honey locust that the main trunk is, the bark looks like it's split
Okay.
in sections. And then there's individual limbs all over dying.
Alright. So, with the splitting of the bark on the honey locust, oftentimes people don't see it real well on the tree, because most of the time when the tree is young, the bark is smooth. But splits are often caused by aging, and that's where you get bark developing. If the splits occur somewhat evenly around the trunk of the tree, oftentimes this is indicative of the aging process. If the split again is on the southwest side, oftentimes the tree has run out of water. And if the split occurs someplace else and only in a large portion, often this is caused by a physical injury, such as people hitting it with the lawnmower, you know, going out and chipping, practicing with a new golf club and hitting the tree with a backswing, or hitting it with a ball or something like that, will cause this damage, and then you get these splits. So you'll want to watch for that. And you know, people will come in and they're concerned oftentimes, you know, maples will split, other trees split. Splitting, as long as it just is through the bark and not into the wood of the tree, is very common. But if you can go and see further into the wood section, then that is definitely a strong inclination, an indicator that there is something seriously wrong there, and that you're going to have to make some choices. Alright, lastly on the honey locust, you can get a little insect. It's a small winged insect that flies around and lays eggs on the new growth. These eggs hatch, and then they cause the leaves to curl up and they form a pea shape there. And so instead of the leaves being flat, they're all clustered, and you get this leaf sticking out with all these peas hanging on it. And at this point, we haven't found any of the systemics to be functioning on this, and so oftentimes we have you prune off any of the branches that are infected, and you also want to go and do an overspray with a contact, which will help kill this insect that's flying through the canopy. Now lastly, to answer your question about branches dying off, oftentimes branches die in every plant, and they will die where they don't get enough light to keep the foliage going. So with trees, especially deciduous trees, when you look up, oftentimes you'll see that interior, close to the trunk, you get these branches that are, you know, anywhere from a foot to 6-8 feet long, where the upper canopy may be out 20 to 30 feet. You have all this dead wood up in there. Other plants, especially a lot of pines, we know our ponderosa pine here, They are a product that does self-lower limbing, in which you never get big giant branches on the bottom of the tree. If you go and you look at our ponderosa pine, you know, usually the biggest the branch is going to get is about this big, but the amount of the canopy, or the amount of tree that has leaves on it, is maybe 30 feet, and then the bottom, everything below that, is just all trunk, and these large old limbs have died off and are falling off, and they fall to the ground. And this self-lower limbing happens on ponderosas, on Jeffreys, and on Scotch pine. And Austrians are well liked because they don't do the self-lower limbing. So you can look for that. Yes?
Back to those pea things you were talking about in those trees. I've got that all over the tree. They fall down every day, and I go out and vacuum them up, and the next day I got a whole bunch of them. That's a problem. It's not a normal occurrence.
Okay, so on the honey locust, if the peas are there in the spring, okay, that's flowers, and they're usually a greenish yellow. If the peas happen in the summer, they turn the leaves yellowy, greenish red, and those fall off, and that's the problem point. If it happens in the spring, flowers; happens in the summer, it's an insect.
And the leaves are yellow. They're supposed to be like that.
On some honey locust, you have yellow leaves. On some honey locust, you have green leaves. On some honey locust, you have burgundy leaves. So normally, if you were to come in and say you have a golden-leafed locust and this is falling off, and it should be ending now, then it's the flowers. If it continues on much longer, if you live in the valley down here, then you're going to be looking. I want you to bring some samples in so we can look at it.
Okay.
But yeah, flowers come in a lot of different shapes and sizes, and you know, like on poinsettias, the red flowers that you see are actually just bracts, and it's the little whites and yellow portion of the poinsettia flower that is actually the flower. And so, you know, what you think of when you're buying a poinsettia is a bract to attract it to the flower, insects to the flower inside. So these green things that are falling out of the tree that you're unaware of are flowers that attract small flying insects, but they're normally not fertile, so they don't produce any fruit. Sometimes you'll see these long, wide bean pods hanging down. That's off the honey locust that has reverted back to its parentage, and that can be a problem. But all right, so after the honey locust, there we've gone through here. We've talked about junipers, lilacs. Normally lilacs, again, you can get these cupped leaves. Oftentimes this is caused by a weed killer being put down. You know, people will use different things. Weed and feed, if you use too much weed and feed, this will usually cause distortion in your lilacs, especially in good years where you get a lot of growth. Frost will cause some damage there. A couple of things. One is people will often have flowers that fail to open, and a number of things can happen. One is that the plant stays too wet, that the flower got frosted, or that the soil is compacted, causing the ground to stay too wet, and oftentimes this leads to, you know, what's called the blast, in which the flower won't mature. But there's that. Every once in a while you can get mildew on your lilacs, but not real common here. All right, moving on to maples. We talked about the ooze coming down on a number of other trees. Maples can also get that, generally caused by stress. We talked about iron chlorosis in other plants. and adding an iron supplement will help with that and changing the pH. We talked about dieback on the birch. Maples can also have winter dieback, where the tops of the trees failed to leaf out in the spring. Now this year I had a lot of people coming in, and the tree started to leaf out. We got a frost and it killed a good portion of the tree, but some of the interior is still alive. It's mottled through the tree and what's coming out, but oftentimes it's close to the trunk. You know, with this you have to go in and prune that out. That's caused by frost hitting at just the right time. So that pretty much wraps up the maples, with the exception of aphids, which we talked about earlier. And the leaves will sometimes become shiny. You know, you look out and they look like they're wet, like somebody's put water on them, but they're also sticky. And again, this is caused by aphids. And with maples, it's usually a nice big old green aphid on there. Alright, mountain ash. Mountain ash isn't really prevalent around here, but again, it's got a thin bark like a honey locust, so it's easily damaged there. But it is in the rose family, so it can get fire blight. So two of the main problems are fire blight when it's in bloom and it picks it up. It's a late spring bloomer, so it often will grab it from hawthorns. So if you have a hawthorn in your neighborhood where part of the tree is dying, you'll want to watch that so that you don't get fire blight on your mountain ash. The other thing is that you'll look for those pustules on the trunk of the tree, or a sunken spot. You know, when you go and you are buying fruit at the grocery store and you pick up an apple and you feel it's indented, not firm all the way around, where it's been smashed. The trunk of the tree can usually feel like that, and that's oftentimes where you'll see these pustules, is where this damage has occurred. Alright, then we've got pines to look at. Pines can get spider mites, and so watch for that. We talked about spider mites on junipers and some of the different products that you can end up getting. The branches can die. We talked about borers, twig girdlers. Other things that can happen that often people don't realize is that we have porcupines around the area. And porcupines will climb up into the tree and eat portions of the bark off the tree as a marking. And where they eat this portion of the bark off, then the branch will die. And in my neighborhood, I was just walking the dog 2-3 days ago, and I saw one limb was dead. We looked up in there, and sure enough, all the bark was ripped off. And so, you know, here in town, there's, you know, some wily porcupine out there wandering around, marking its territory. Now, also with bears, bears will mark their territory often by ripping parts of a tree, the bark off a tree. And so, should you go out one day and find a tree totally destroyed and not knowing what happened while you heard the dogs barking, you may have been visited by a bear and he's staking out your front or backyard as part of his territory. So should you see that, it wouldn't hurt you to call not animal control. You want to call state wildlife and talk to Mr. Lackey. He's usually in charge of bears.
How about raccoons? When you cause them again? I got up at 3:30 this morning and there was a raccoon whose body was as big as a ladder.
Yeah, well, raccoons normally don't cause a lot of plant damage until the fruit gets ripe in the vegetable gardens, and then they'll go through and they'll tear apart squash and pumpkins, and they'll eat peppers and a lot of different things. But most often raccoons these days want the dog and cat food, so always keep that well contained, and you know, keep that locked up. And once they get in there, you know, don't keep putting food out for the animals. Just put enough out for them to eat it, because they'll come right through the dog door into the house, and once they're in there, they will cause the problem.
We set my motion light off, that's why I looked out, because my light was on. I thought it was a person out in my yard.
Yeah, well, they're big enough
just
to
waddle down
turn
the
the
road.
motion light on outside. Those raccoons can get big, and whatever you do, they may look slow, and they may look, you know, like a fat cat or a fat dog. You do not want to mess with a raccoon, because their claws are tremendously sharp, and their bite is excruciating painful, and their teeth are you know, will tear you apart. So don't sick the dog out on them. Yeah. So all right. Back on pines, also on spruce. If you notice sap mushrooming out from the trunk, normally with sawdust mixed in, this is caused by a borer. And borers are flat-headed borers or round-headed borers that cause this. And these borers often are what's killing the trees up in the Tahoe Basin. And so one of the easiest ways for you to get them down here is to go and collect firewood up there, where they let you harvest the dead trees up there. You bring it down, and the borers come with it, and then they eat their way in through the interior of the trunk. And a tree's natural mechanism to try and rid itself of borers is to push sap out, to try and push the borer out. And you will see this sawdust mixed in with this sap as it's mushrooming out. Okay, if it's just leaking out, and you're generally clear or whitish or maybe a little golden, and it's leaking out and just streaming down, this is often caused by either the plant growing quickly and the bark breaking and allowing, you know, some of the sap to leak out, or it's caused by stress. But lastly here is that sap is pouring out from a regular sized hole in the tree, and more often on pines than on spruce you've got a sapsucker. And this is a small looking little woodpecker, and he's drilling even holes, you know, it's all the same size all the way around the tree, causing the tree to leak sap. And when he does this, there is no sawdust mixed in, and so, you know, people say, well, how do you get rid of sapsuckers? And normally you don't, because their brain is about the size of a pea, and it rattles around, the best I can tell, every time they slam their beak into the trunk. And you know, I know what it feels like hitting nails. I can only imagine what their head feels like at the end of the day after they beat their brains back and forth. They don't move on very regularly, and there's no real good thing to put out. You can't net the tree real easily, because with an evergreen, the branches keep the netting way out, and they're small enough that they can usually find their way in. And it's just a matter of time until they get tired of looking at that one tree, and then they move on to another tree. So, okay, also on pines, we'll move on, and the needles are yellowing or browning towards the ends, and a lot of times this is seen in the summertime. Often this has to do with pH being too alkali. Pines normally live on the mountains, and they get most of their water, and the needles fall down and they make the ground acidic. So pines like acid, and where, you know, we're planting pines often here in the valleys is where alkali seems to accumulate, and salts. So the yellowing at the ends of the needles can be caused by alkali and by salt. Also can be caused by lack of watering. Now if the whole tree is turning yellow, then you can have a problem with overwatering, and there's very little to do with that, except turn the water off. But if you just have brown or black tips with yellow behind it, and then the base of the needles are green, that's usually fine as far as not having a huge problem with the fungus going. The reason why I say that is the next one we're going to talk about is with oftentimes people come in and the top of their Austrian pine has turned brown and it's working its way down, usually on the leeward side of the tree, and this is a fungus that has attacked the crown of the tree and is working its way down, killing the entire needle, and you'll want to work on controlling that. Oftentimes this Phyton works exceedingly well, but we also have you sometimes do other products to combat that, because you can build up a resistance if you use the same product over and over again. So we usually have you buy 2 different fungicides to control this and spray on those. Alright, so after the pines, then we can look at spruce, and almost all the same things that we've talked about. Spider mites can cause it being dusty, the needles being yellowing. Often on the new growth would be overwatering. We talked about borers. We talked about sap leaking from the trunk caused by stress. Sap mushrooming out caused by borers. But a couple of other things that we haven't talked about here is needles missing from one side of the tree, and generally it's the windward side. And oftentimes I go out in very open environments and you know, people have these large spruce and the needles are all gone on the southwest side. Again, this is usually caused by wind just blowing so hard it blows the needles right off the tree. Another one is that the needles turn pink in color. If the new growth is turning pink, generally this is a fungus, and again we have you spray for this using a combination. But if the older growth is further in the tree is turning pink or yellow, oftentimes this is indicative where you had spider mites in years past, or that you had fungus in years past and that you've sprayed it and taken care of it. So when you have an issue and you're looking inside the tree, you know, there's no sunlight getting to the center of the tree, and this is why oftentimes branches such as your honey locust branch may be dying, or other portions of plants. You know, you'll look in the center of a pine tree, a spruce tree, a juniper, an arborvitae, it's all dead inside there. And so you'll want to look at that and realize that that is mostly caused by lack of light. So on oaks, next plant we get to, we can talk about lack of deep water causing browning on the tips there, and you know, just watering slowly for a long period of time, once or twice a month, along with your standard lawn watering, will usually correct that problem. We also talked about the leaves being glossy and sticky on the oak by an aphid. Poplars, we talked about basically everything with the aspens, but there are a couple other ones. One is there's lumps that can form on the branches. This is galls, and this is caused by a virus being spread by insects. And so normally the best thing to do is cut all those branches off and try and get rid of that. So with that, that pretty much wraps up the trees and a lot of the shrubs. Some of the few things that we have left out in the plant kingdom here would be on grapes and Virginia creeper. There's a small creature that is out there and worms its ways through the center of the leaf, and this is called a leaf miner. And oftentimes when the plant is growing, you can see this whitish green marking, and it will work in a spiral, and it starts off very small and then it gradually gets bigger. Leaf miners are seen, like I mentioned, on grapes and Virginia creeper. You also find them on Swiss chard and on spinach. So you'll want to watch those crops. And leaf miners usually on Virginia creeper, you can end up using the tree and shrub insecticide, or you can use a systemic spray because it's inside the leaf. There's no way you can kill it with a contact spray. But the other item is that you just go through and you cut the leaves off, and this is normally what we recommend with grapes, because you can't use any of these products to control leaf miners on grapes. If you have leaf miners, again, the parent is a small flying insect, so oftentimes in late summer you can do some proactive spraying. Generally, I would recommend something like neem oil or a pyrethrin, something organic like that, that won't damage the grape much. A lot of the other chemicals are so harsh it can end up making the fruit fall off, and that's something that you definitely want to avoid. Real quick here, a couple other things on tomatoes and other fruits that you may have that I should mention. You get blossom end rot. This is due to lack of calcium, and squash can have this, peppers and tomatoes. So calcium is what will stop that. This is a liquid that you can put on. You can also get calcium in bone meal or in gypsum, and so by applying those products to the garden, often you'll alleviate that. And then people always seem to have problems with setting of tomatoes or other vegetables, and this even works on fruit, as long as it, on cherries and things like that. If the frost doesn't get it, but you can spray the blossom, and this will help with fruit set. So that pretty much will wrap up most of the issues that I had thought about, that I wanted to talk to you about. And if there's any other questions, I'd be happy to answer those at this point. Yes?
I have a smoke tree.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a green one.
Yes.
And every year it looks like it's going to produce the smoky fruit or whatever it is, blossom, but it never does. They kind of all just disappear overnight for some reason.
All right. If your smoke tree is coming out and it looks like it's ready to go into flowering for you, and then it fails to, oftentimes, what we believe is happening is that it's usually in a heavy soil, and it may be staying wet. Now, you're shaking your head and you're saying,
We're sand for 18 inches.
sand for 18 inches. Okay, so with that, the other issues that we can also look at is going to be wind, but we haven't been real windy this year.
It's on the east side of the house.
And it's
so
on the
got
east
a little-
side, so it's
little
protected.
protection.
So, at this point, I can't tell you what is causing you not to end up getting that.
Well, the tree is pretty. I'm not unhappy with the tree, but I
Yep.
just always kind of wanted the smoky blossoms.
Okay. There is one other thing that I failed to mention, since you brought up smoke tree. That reminded me of lilac, which reminded me of euonymus and roses. There are these groups of plants that are visited nightly by root weevil. Now, it sounds like root weevils would be eating the roots, but this is a small black insect that has a nose on it like that of an elephant in comparison to the size of the nose to the body, and it will come up and chew out edges of the leaves, and so you'll never see something eating it during the day. But if you were to go out at night, oftentimes you'll see this weevil climbing up the stems or all over the plant. So if you were out there watching late night television, you know, I can't say Johnny Carson or Jay Leno anymore, but you know, whoever else is out, be aware of that. You can spray at night. The Merit seems to work well, but one of the other items is these beneficial nematodes. If you know that you've had these problems in the past, you can get these nematodes, and this is a tiny little creature here which eats its way into the beetle when it's in the larval stage before it becomes a true beetle, and then it eats the inside of the beetle out and kills them that way so that the beetle never matures. Sounds kind of gruesome, but you know, you're killing it in a young stage naturally. These guys may overwinter from year to year, but oftentimes they don't because it gets too cold here. Where people often are cringing because of the word nematode, I should make mention, once again, it is a beneficial nematode rather than a root infecting nematode, and so it will help the plant. Alright. Lastly here, we'll talk about lawns, because that is usually an area that most people have big problems with, in which your lawn may end up being yellow in areas. And if your lawn is yellow in an area and it's in a sunny or windy spot, and the lawn is green next to the house, the fence, or where the trees may be offering shade in the afternoon, this oftentimes is indicative of lack of watering in that area. Now, if the lawn is yellow overall, oftentimes this is indicative of too frequent a watering or lack of nutrients, either the fertilizer or the iron. Now, if the lawn is great, green, healthy, and then all of a sudden turns gray one night and straw brown the next day, often this is a fungus, and this is caused by overuse of quick release fertilizers, watering usually in the evening, and trying to have the best lawn on the block, and watering too often. So infrequent watering and deep watering will help control that, but once that gets going, often we have you go in and we have you use like a fungus control for lawns here, and this is normally called brown patch. We can also get rust here, which the lawn will turn a reddish brown in spots, and you go down and you look at the stems and you'll see these red dots on it. If you believe you have a fungus, a lot of times you'll see the green down at the base of the plant, or you'll see a brown yellow stripe through the middle, and the leaf above is green and the leaf below is green, and then the leaf above will usually die off where that stripe was in just a few days, and then that fungus will continue down through the plant very rapidly. So you'll want to watch that. Here on the bag you can see a nice picture of dollar spot and the fungus there, and how that's going to look when you look at it on the grass. And you will see these black dots if you look closely on the grass itself. Now, I should make mention that lawn, like everything else, has some disease at all points, all times. So it's not that we want your grass to be completely free of all of this, we just want it under control. Yes?
Does that also help with those mushrooms that are coming up everywhere on lawns? Or?
Generally, fungus control, most fungicides will not go and control mushrooms. The bad news is that Bayer, the aspirin people, they have a product out called ProStar, and this is the only product that seems to control fairy ring and mushrooms, and they have gone and they have discontinued the 1 pound pack, which was selling for $110 a piece, and they now have it in the 3 pound pack, which is selling for the nice right price of $300. So for most people, I tell you, don't worry about the mushrooms. Oftentimes that's a normal thing that happens in the cycle. Most mushrooms will come and go within a 3-month period. They're the sexual fruiting body of the fungus that lives down in the ground. Most fungicides won't work deep enough in the soil. ProStar is the only one that will go down deep enough and kill off fairy ring and a lot of these mushrooms for you. Most lawn mushrooms are not poisonous. You know, now yes, I will tell you that if I drink enough water, I can get sick and throw up. If I eat enough pizza, well, maybe not. But if I eat enough other stuff, maybe mushrooms, I could get sick and throw up. But, you know, if anything, children, dogs, you know, anybody else that wants to go out and eat mushrooms that are growing up off the ground, if they eat enough of them, they can get sick, but most mushrooms in lawns are not poisonous, okay? And usually black and yellow or orange is an indicator that they're poisonous. If they're white or brown, it usually is an indicator that they're not. Now, usually an indicator are key words there, okay? I don't want to say that they, you know, aren't in any other stretch of the imagination, okay? So, other items that can happen with lawns is that if snow sits on an area in the wintertime too long, you can get something called snow mold, and oftentimes the ground is pink there, and so you can cure or stop that from happening by putting some air row cover cloth blankets down in that area before the snow comes, or else you can go and spray the lawn with a preventer with a fungicide and help keep that from happening. Now, once you are using these fungus controls, I should make mention that they don't recommend that you dump the grass clippings in your compost pile, nor do they want you to go and oh, well, let's back up. I should mention overuse of fungicides can be detrimental to the life actions in the soil, such as the microbes, the mycorrhizae, and the earthworms. So just going in and spraying fungicides often, you will deplete the soil's health that way, and you can then end up having issues further on. It would be like me telling you, you know, you should take a penicillin every day, you know, for safety reasons, and then find out that, you know, you get something that is not killed off by penicillin. Your body has no other immunities in there to wipe it out, so your body can go into, you know, a tragic spiral in which you get sick very quickly. This holds true with using too much fungicide because you're killing off so many things in the soil. Soil fungus is a huge portion of what is good, and the Dr. Earth handout that we handed out to you, this has beneficial soil microbes and mycorrhizae and everything in here. So I'm a big proponent for having you use a lot of the Dr. Earth fertilizers to help add life into your soil. And I almost always, when you have a fungus issue, I tell you to go in and use Dr. Earth 2 to 3 weeks after you're done with your final treatment to help reinitialize beneficial cultures in your soil. Like the doctor would have you eat yogurt after you're done with a penicillin type culture form. So, okay, yes.
I have two questions. I've got little mounds of dirt, loose dirt coming up all over. I've dug down. I don't think it's mold. I can't find any tunnels or anything.
Okay.
I can't find anything in these little loose piles of dirt. And the second question, is it better to mulch your grass when you cut or pick it up with a bag and get rid of it?
All right. So the mounds of dirt, generally that you can't find a hole, oftentimes are moles. Okay? They're just sneaky, tricky little devils down there. And if there's loose dirt, that's a mole. Okay? With no hole. It's not a worm. Worms will come up, throw the stuff off to the side and leave a small hole the size of a pencil. Squirrels throw all the soil out in one direction. Gophers make a ring in another direction. Birds tear everything out looking for the worms and make a V-shaped pit. And so the only thing that makes that loose soil is going to be a mole. And then your second question was,
Is it better to leave your clippings on the lawn or pick
leave
them
your
up?
clippings on the lawn. If you have a mulching mower, okay, the mulching mower tells you to mow and leave the clippings on the grass, but to mow every 3 to 4 days during the season, okay? Because if you only mow once a week with a mulching mower, it can't break it down fine enough for it to become organic matter here in our soils, and you get thatch buildup very quickly, okay? So if you're going to go and only mow once a week, then I want you to collect as much as you can. And again, this Dr. Earth product here, like Dr. Earth All Natural Lawn Food is the one that I'd recommend. That has products in there that help eat up the thatch that is developing there. And thatch makes your lawn spongy, so when you walk on it, it feels like you're walking on a carpet with a thick pad. You know you have thatch then, and thatch brings in insects and brings in disease. And so if you didn't want to use the Dr. Earth, there is a liquid that you can spray on called the Lawn Dethatcher, and it too will chew up this thatch and turn it from a detriment to a benefit for you. And once it's worked down to a finer product, then the worms will take it and bring it down and put it into the soil. So you have to watch what your habits are or what you're doing before I can tell you which way to go. And normally people want to mow infrequently as possible, so I tell them to collect it rather than just let it lay there. Okay? Yes?
For years, my husband has taken the grass clippings and thrown them over the exterior of our fence on the outside of our land,
Yes.
and it's still stacked there. I bet there's 2 or 3 years worth of it has never broke down.
Okay, so the grass that he's dumping over the fence never breaks down. A couple of things that you need to have happen to get items to break down is you have to have aeration, you have to have nitrogen, and you have to have moisture. Okay? And then you have to have the microbes in there. So if you don't have the microbes and the soil and the grass clippings, when you cut it and you put it down there, it can pack down and it can end up becoming anaerobic, which means without air, and you don't get a lot of decomposition going. You get slow breakdown. And then if you're not adding water and turning it and adding some nitrogen, it will never break down. But if you get started, if you work some soil into that and you turn it over and throw a little fertilizer in there and, take some red fishing worms that you didn't drown and throw them out there, okay, then you can start. And once you get it started, then you can usually go and just let it continue working on naturally. But you have to go and get it to that starting point, and you have to help by adding the water. So, okay.
I didn't want to load it all up to try to take dumps, what I didn't want to do.
Yeah, it's good stuff if you know what to do with it. Okay? Alright. Yes.
I have a bush, I call it snowball bush, got big white flowers all over it.
Right?
I don't know if that's the proper term or not.
It sounds like a snowball to me. And the leaves are all curled like the gentleman has in his hand next to you. And that's aphid damage. Okay.
The flowers are already falling off of it, really lasting about a week or two.
2 weeks. Yep.
Yeah. Now, I've recently bought this house and this bush has just gone wild. Nobody ever trimmed it or nothing. So I'm wondering about pruning it. It definitely needs to be cut back. When do I do that? And how far back do I go with these big long willowy branches?
All right. So on pruning, normally the rule of thumb is prune after the plant has bloomed. Okay. And on a snowball bush, you can go and prune back, 10% to 90%, and have it flush out now, and you can take it to whatever size you want. Just realize that if you prune it to the size you want, it's going to grow this summer and become bigger. Okay, and normally it grows to be 10 feet tall anyhow and 10 feet wide. So pulling out as big a stem out of the center of the plant, the old main trunk wood, okay, is one of the best pruning habits you can get into, rather than just shearing the tops. Okay, going in, pulling center pieces out and thinning it from the inside out is going to be much better than just pruning the tops to that cupcake habit that most of us try to do. Okay, if you can pull these old stems out, it allows sunlight down in there, it allows the stems to become thicker, they don't fall and flop open as much, and you get more air in there and more birds, and then the birds help control some of the insect problems that you can have. So, I mentioned the cupping of the leaves on the ash. Snowballs are the next big thing, and I should have mentioned snowballs here while we were going over it, but yes, and you're flowering on trees and shrubs. Normally it's 2.5, maybe 3 weeks. That's all the flower usually lasts on most all your flowering trees and shrubs. Okay, from start to finish.
All of them you can prune after that?
Yep, prune after the flowers are gone. Okay. If you prune in the winter and it's a spring bloomer, you cut off all the flowers. Like on people who have lilacs that may have never seen a flower and they lived in the house 20 years, they prune their lilacs religiously every winter, cutting it way back down. They pruned off all their flowers. So, okay. All right. So I want to say thank you for coming here.